What's up, Amazon sellers? Today, I'm super excited to bring you, should we say, an interview with Checkmate Flips. I've been following his journey and he is super open and honest about what he's doing, but also as well, his sourcing and even right now, his road to 20,000 a month on his YouTube channel. Now, I'm really interested to learn about his journey, but also as well, hiring a VA and even F.I.R.E, which I will let him explain what that means in a minute. So if you're interested in learning more, stay tuned. Okay, so today I'm super excited to have this interview with Checkmate Flips and to learn more about his journey. Now, in particular, the two things I'm really interested in. Number one, his team, decision to hire a VA, what do they do and how do they help him grow his Amazon business? And then number two, something I touched on earlier on, F.I.R.E. And if you're interested in learning about what that is, stay tuned, we'll talk about that. So Checkmate Flips, thank you so much for joining me today and obviously taking time out of your busy day. If anyone doesn't know who you are, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and who you are in your journey so far?
Yeah, thank you for having me. So basically, I've been selling online for a little over 3 years now. I started, my brother came back from college break and he was like, bro, I'm making $600 extra a month selling used clothes on Depop. And at the time I was a student, that's like absolutely nothing. But when you're a student, that's like substantial. So I'm like, hey, let's give this a shot. I've kind of always wanted to flip online for real. So I did that, ended up getting into that. Eventually it transitioned into eBay, selling used clothes, used shoes. Did that for quite a while, was doing that always on the side of being a student. And then I was in my internship in my master's degree and COVID happened and basically everything was canceled for several months and I had nothing to do as a student, but I was making money on eBay doing that. And I'm like, shoot, like I wasn't really enjoying my internship that much. I would love to just do this full time and see how this goes. Like I can just do this for several months until we get back into the swing of things and kind of see how it goes from there. And several days into it, I'm like, yep, this is what I need to be doing full time. I need to be reselling full time. At the end of 2020, this was the beginning of 2020, I'm like, it would be really fun to have a side hustle for my side hustle, which is Amazon, selling used books from garage sales. And I eventually, actually very quickly found out it was much easier to find profitable inventory for Amazon than it was for eBay. And the listing process was much, much better. I did that and we have my cat walking on my desk and that's the best. But ended up doing that, started transitioning completely onto Amazon, doing used books. I did used books for around 9 months and then eventually transitioned to doing retail arbitrage and online arbitrage. And yeah, I guess that's the short version of it.
Fantastic. So you started, so thank you so much. So you if I just kind of clarify, you started off, was it eBay, was that right? Flipping or reselling used products onto eBay?
Yeah, the very first thing was this app called Depop. It's basically an app where a lot of teens, college students, young people are like selling like fashionable clothing. It's kind of a strange app in my opinion, but it was a fun time. And then I started on eBay after that as well.
What's the new one now? I think I see people doing like Poshmark, is that the one?
Yeah, Poshmark has been out for a long time. Yeah. Poshmark's sorry.
No, I'm so not with it at all.
It's
so obviously go.
It's just a site you literally have to like refresh your stuff in order to get it like out there to people. So it's an interesting site to say the least.
So obviously clothing onto Depop, and then obviously you did eBay, and then you moved over to actually reselling onto Amazon because obviously the listing process you talked about. And obviously now you're doing, if I'm right in thinking, obviously I follow your journey. So now it's eBay to Amazon flips pretty much.
Right.
Would that be correct?
Exactly. Yeah. So instead of doing like a thrifting model selling on Amazon where I'd have to go to a garage sale, a thrift store, and estate sale, I know the products that sell well on Amazon and I buy them at a discounted price from eBay to sell on Amazon.
Okay, fine. Question, how long have you been doing that for, the eBay to Amazon?
It's been since around October of last year.
Okay, fine. So what, a year and...
A little over a year. Yeah,
just over a year. Okay, fine, cool. Fantastic. So one question for you, and I've got to ask this question. Are you worried about like IP complaints or like inauthenticity? Like, I appreciate I do arbitrage. Like I'm buying from Walmart. Like it's more traditional. We had a conversation offline about this, but you know, eBay is a little bit more more third-party sellers. Is that something you worry about, or you know, how does that work? If you don't mind me asking.
Yeah, that's kind of like the elephant in the room whenever I talk about eBay to Amazon. You know what I mean? Because it's like, what do you do with not having invoices? How do you deal with IP complaints? And for me, it's definitely in the forefront of my mind. That means that I have to be very on top of making sure that my quality control is on point, making sure that my return rate is good, making sure that I'm looking at the Keepa graphs to be sure, are there massive drop-offs in sellers? Like, is the brand selling on the listing? Making sure to do all these checks before actually sending stuff in, because like when I make a mistake, I don't really have the receipt to cover myself. So I have to just kind of take that hit on my account. Also, on top of that, recently I've been adding volume of items that I'm not going to have problems with, that I do have receipts for. That way there's a higher ratio of good transactions on my account to kind of offset any mistakes that I make. So that's how I deal with it.
The one thing I always thought about was like, do you potentially like buy some of your inventory from a legitimate source and then some from eBay, and then obviously if they ever ask, you could just use the invoices for this? I'm sure people probably do it.
I've thought of that. Yeah. Usually when you have a claim, they want receipts for all, like if you sold 23 units and you have a receipt for like 2 of the units, they want the 23.
Yeah, no, I understand. I was always about like, could you get around it that way? But no,
that's,
honestly, thank you so much.
That's how I started doing it. I felt like, oh yeah, I'll be safe if I have this one invoice. Like I would buy it from like Best Buy, I'd have the receipt, and then I'd do eBay to Amazon, but I don't think that necessarily works.
Fantastic. The one thing which I will say is, obviously, I followed your journey, and the one thing you're doing right now is the documenting, making 20,000 a month, reselling on Amazon, and you're showing all the products you're finding. So first things first, thank you for that. I think it's really good. And we talked offline and said how like there's some things that I really wanted to like. I learned from there that I think my team would also appreciate as well. So thank you for documenting that. I think that's great. And also as well, it's just nice to like, so many people like get their phone and like show sales graphs, but like going into the detail of it is quite a lot more challenging. So I think that's a really lovely thing that you're doing and documenting that, and also talk about it, because a lot of us look at the bigger sellers and go, wow, but how do we do it on a granular level? And you're building that up. So I like that. And also when I watched it, I was like, wow, there's a lot of eBay here. Like this is where you're making a lot of money. I know a lot of people do it, and especially like it's a really big thing. And obviously a common friend of ours, Rake and Profit, he does that very heavily, and he's all into that as well. So it's really nice to see that, and obviously sharing the journey. So thank you. Now the reason why I'm interested, obviously, interviewing you today is particularly around a decision that you made. I don't know how long ago, and I'd like to ask. You're obviously running, you started out, doing Depop, then you went onto eBay, and then you went onto Amazon, which is great. And you're making money because obviously you've been doing this for a couple of years now. You decided to hire a VA, and that's a big decision. If I can ask you, you've got a team now. Can I ask a little bit about that? Are you happy to share around that virtual assistant? Tell me about your team. What do they do in your business?
I hired a virtual assistant. I think it was last December. So we've been working together for around a year now, and I have one virtual assistant for my Amazon business right now. Also, one person is editing as well. But for the Amazon business, one virtual assistant. Like right now, I work with prep centers, and so for a while, I was doing all the inputting of purchases, which was taking me like an hour a day, especially if like stuff was low ASP, average selling price. So she takes care of all that. For a while, she was purchasing inventory for me as well, but we're switching business models a little bit, and so we need to get that ironed out before she does that again. But she's finding profitable stuff for me to purchase. If I want to do research, I kind of just tell her like, hey, can you do research down like this quote unquote rabbit trail? That way I'm not spending like 2 hours looking into something that she's trained to look into. So it ends up saving me a lot of time. My Amazon store, it's definitely like I'm a full-time Amazon seller, but I'm definitely not spending full time on it. It's usually 15 to 20 hours a week on the Amazon store. I could definitely cut that down more, but it's not 40 hours a week, that's for sure. And if I didn't have a virtual assistant, I would probably be more up in the 30 to 50 hours a week range. So that saves a lot of time.
Fantastic. Hey, honestly, thank you. And it's a she, is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, Roseanne.
And is she full-time? Is Roseanne full-time?
Roseanne is full-time. Yeah.
Fantastic. And where's she based, may I ask?
She's in the Philippines. Yeah.
Same as my team. I have a team obviously in the Philippines as well. So let me ask you a question. I appreciate she's doing this work for you. Why? Why did you hire a VA? A lot of people no one can replace me. No one's as good as me. I am the best. I'm not saying that you or I think that way, but that's quite a common thing that I hear. No one's going to be as good as me. It's just going to be too much hassle. Why did you hire her? Why did you make that decision?
Yeah, I totally understand that. And that's something that I continue to have to struggle and grow in on a daily basis because, like, for a while, I wasn't letting her into my replenishable sheet. I wasn't letting her into my eBay account. I think the thing for me is like I was scared that she was going to like get on my account and like purchase stuff and like scam me. And then also like the work that I was doing was irreplaceable. But like I kind of realized at a certain point, like I'm delegating with softwares, I'm delegating with other things. I had a employee listing my books when I was doing books for a while. And with online arbitrage, like you need some help. And even if they're doing it 60% of the ability that you're doing it, that's not you spending the time doing all this stuff. So it's going to end up saving a lot of time, and it's just going to be a net positive for you in the long term. So that's my point of view on this.
It's an interesting one. I really understand. I see it with people where it's like, I'm in a slightly different situation where my team are actually better than me because they source all the time and I'm rubbish at sourcing now. But I understand it conceptually and I understand how to do it and I've done it, but now I've not done it for years. When you first start, I really take that point. If they are 60% as good as you, well, that now means you get to get some of your time back to go spend it whereby you can really add value, and some things you don't need to do. Like I think you talked about it, like inputting purchases, sourcing down rabbit holes. Like, yeah, you're going to be better, but you might do it more efficiently, but that's like another 8 hours you can deploy somewhere.
Yeah.
Whereas if you did it, it'd be 12 hours worth of work in only 8. My God, it's 8 hours that you don't have to worry about.
Right.
So it's like,
yeah,
saved.
It's a big deal.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point. So you hired Roseanne, a year ago, and why the Philippines?
It seems like it's the country where they generally know English pretty well, and they also are like really educated, can do a really good job. There's kind of like a culture around that. Where a lot of people in the Philippines are working online, like employment, and so they kind of understand how to step into those roles.
And how did you learn about it? Like, you don't just obviously meet people from the Philippines in the street. Like, how did you learn about like hiring a VA and doing all this? Because it's a skill set, isn't it? It's like selling on Amazon and eBay.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a delegation skill muscle that you build by doing things slowly over time. Like my first virtual assistant was adding up my transactions when I was selling books because I wasn't using any kind of software. That was just like the tiny little baby step that grows into more. So if you don't know how to delegate to a virtual assistant, I think I was thinking like, how do I hire someone full time? Like, how do I actually have enough for them to do? Because I don't know how to delegate this, but it's a skill that you grow over time. But how did I learn about it? YouTube videos, like your YouTube videos, Fields of Profit, Romer the Romer, kind of just watched all of your guys' stuff and tried to do the best that I could, kind of combining all that information.
Hey, honestly, well done. Like, massive respect. And can I ask, like, if someone's watching your journey right now and they're like, hey, I'm thinking about getting VA, I'm not sure, like, what did you learn on that journey? You've had Roseanne for a year now, like, what would you recommend? Like, you got your first VA, how's it going? What would you recommend? What did you learn?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess I don't know how to respond right away, but basically, I think one made...
Well, what went wrong? And how would you improve it?
Yeah, I mean, I would say being really positive off the bat with them is a big deal. Instead of like, because kind of like what I was saying before, like at the beginning, maybe they're only 60% as good as you at sourcing, and potentially maybe they're worse because they don't quite understand your business model. They haven't worked with you before. So if you like ask them to find leads, maybe at the beginning 1 or 2 out of 10 are like leads that you would actually purchase. So you could really like rip them down and destroy them over those 8 leads. And like you might think that being extremely critical of those leads is the best way to go, but like if you can say like, hey, like the ROI on this one was really good, like you actually saw that the velocity was really good on this, I wouldn't purchase this most likely because it looks like there's going to be IP issues. If you can kind of phrase it a little bit more like that, they tend to learn faster, and like common sense, like I know I would learn faster like that as well. So being able to be a little bit more positive in there with them has helped me a lot.
Yeah, I think that's some really good advice. And I think, regardless of whether it's a VA, if anyone would come along to you and chose to pick on all the 9 problems, you had 1 good success and 9 failures, and all they do is pick on the 9 failures, you're not going to want to try and learn. You're going to want to quit and move on.
Yeah.
But like choosing to focus on the successes, because why? Because we want to turn it from 9 failures to 9 successes and 1 failure. That's where we want it to be. But it takes time. And like, I always kind of use the analogy of like a baby learning to walk. The baby has to fall over over. And when it falls over, we can't go, haha, you fell over. We've got to go, oh, well done for trying. Come on, let's go again. Like, because otherwise they're never going to learn. And it's a point where we create an environment which is really helpful. So positive environment. Any other tips you recommend? Obviously, anything that's worked really well with Roseanne?
I would say not being like, for me, I think it's been helpful to not be so like tight on my virtual assistant. Like you need to be working, like you need to like clock in, clock out, like make sure you're working 40 hours a week on the dot. For me, like if they're getting the jobs done that I'm asking them to do and helping push the business forward, I'm happy with it. Maybe it would be different if I was paying them more, like more of an American. If I was paying them like $3,000 a month, like man, they need to be like on top of it. But just the dollar ends up going farther, and so like if they get the jobs done that I need them to get done, I'm not gonna worry about it, if that makes sense. That's probably also an area that I could grow in to really like help them get the most out of it, but it's kind of a work in progress still for me.
Yeah, that's fine. I think it is a really interesting point. Do you know what's really interesting is if you look at the big tech companies, like, you know, who do pay the way more than $3,000 a month,
right?
Like they don't clock in and clock out.
Really?
They literally,
yeah. That's true.
Yeah, like you look at Google. They have Friday is fun day. Do whatever any project you want to work on. These are like some of the top end developers in the world, pay top things, and Google gives them 20% of the week to do whatever you want. Like, it's really interesting. So I think it's a really interesting, you know, kind of realization. Let me ask you a question. What does like day-to-day operations look like? What's your contact time? How does that look?
Yeah, so basically I have been like sending her an email, basically kind of like outlining the things that I want her to do in a specific day. Ideally, if I could sit down and be like, all right, for the week, these are the things I would like you to do, that would probably save me a lot of time. But we're just not there at the moment. Basically, it's those things. Almost always it includes like if I made purchases, I want her to go in and like bookkeep all the things, like keeping track in my replenishable sheet, like how many we have in stock and when we sent them in, potential profit sent in, amount of money spent on inventory, prep center sheets. So that's kind of the process for that in my business. And then also it usually comes down to finding profitable leads for me to review and then purchase.
Let me ask you, so thank you. Let me ask you a question. We're about to start 2023. You know, it's December 2022 right now. What does 2023 look like for you? What do you want? Where do you want to be? What's the goal?
I think the goal for me right now is going towards 10K profit months, and kind of get it to a point where that's kind of like a norm, if that makes sense. Last year there were months where I think I did like 15K profit, 16K profit a couple months, but then there were also months where things went very wrong and I ended up being like not as profitable as I wanted to be. So like kind of stability within the business would be a really good thing for me, but like high stability, if that makes sense. We don't want like stable low months.
Agreed. I think that's the thing that people talk about, like, you know, you want consistent income, consistent profitability, and like, and that's running about a consistent operation or a stable operation. Right. So you talked about 10K. Anything else that you're looking for? We'll come on to F.I.R.E in a minute, but anything else in the business? I
mean, always growth. So like, I'll probably end up getting to that point and be like, all right, like I can do this. I can grow this even more. So yeah, I'm still kind of debating what my goals even are in 2023. I need to like sit down and think about all this.
What's the saying? I say it to my team. My God, perfect planning prevents piss poor performance.
Right.
So like plan. That's my job. My job is just planning, like super organized planning to lead the team. Obviously, you talked about 10K profit months consistently. You know, are you looking to scale the team up? What's the situation there? You know, maybe hire again, or are you happy with the one?
I think I would want to basically make sure that she's actually purchasing first. Like if we get to the point where she's purchasing, she's inputting stuff into the prep center sheet, and like that's actually delegated, then it would make sense for me to hire someone else, I think, in my situation.
So you're probably looking at what, Roseanne plus one more VA, is that right, for the operation?
Potentially, yeah.
Ooh, hey, interesting. Okay, thank you so much. So question for you, I talked about it earlier on, we talked about it offline. I mentioned some weird word called FIRE. I don't think you're going to be setting yourself on fire. What does FIRE mean in regards to this weird concept, if anyone doesn't know?
Yeah, so for those who don't know, FIRE is basically standing for financially independent, retire early. Basically, it's the idea that like building up enough money so that you could live off of the passive income. So like we were talking about this a little bit off camera. Let's say you lived in Thailand, for example, and the amount of money that you need to live in a year is, I don't know, like $10,000 or something. If you had enough money that passively made $10,000, you would basically be at that point, and you would have the option to not work if you don't want to work, or to just work on things that you would like to work on. I mean, you can do that without this idea as well, but everything's a big balancing act. So basically that's the idea. That's kind of what I'm working towards. At the same time, like, it's always a balancing act, because like, you don't want to just like put your head to the grindstone and just like hate your life until you get there. You know what I mean? But you can still be working towards something.
What's the saying I hear someone talk about? Is like the 40-40-40 principle. It's like work 40 hours a week for 40 years of your life to earn 40% of the income that you normally have. And I'm not dissing people who do retirement or like the normal typical job. I think it's great, you know, like absolutely fine. If you have a job, you know, massive, and you love it, you know, really well done. And I'm not saying entrepreneurship is the answer to everything, but I think what's really important is you have something that you enjoy, and you say a dream, and you go towards that, and you try and live the best life you can. And if that means that you do FIRE, it's absolutely fantastic. You know, if you don't mind me asking, have you got a plan for FIRE? Have you got a date in mind? Have you thought about that? Do you know where it, you know, that if you go, my plan is going to get me to retirement in 10 years, for example, do you know what that looks like?
No, I do not have a plan necessarily, because I mean, even in the last couple of years, my like income has gone up a lot. And so like, to even think like a year ago, or even 2 years ago, I might have been thinking like, man, I'll save like 15K a year and I'll get there in like 10, 11, 12 years based on like compounding and everything and how much I'm saving. But now it could be much, much sooner as well. So I don't know. This year was a lot of like reinvesting back into the business. And so the business is running on cash right now. And then next year, even if I make the same amount of profit, we'll have saved a lot. And that's only assuming if I make the same amount of money. So yeah.
It's a really interesting point. I still remember it when I did the road to 1 million. It took us, we thought we'd do it in 18 months. We did it in 12.
Yeah.
I hired my ops manager, and then he did the next million in 3 months.
That's wild. Yeah.
Like, it's like crazy, but you know, and I think the point comes is that as you build your business, it starts growing rapidly, and you're like, wow, what I'm achieving now, I didn't even think was going to be possible a year ago. It's a very changing, like, should we say, equation, and that's the one thing I love about business and growing it. Like, you are in control of your destiny. And it can have a real impact. So honestly, FIRE, and obviously we talked about it. So top question for you, if someone is thinking about FIRE, are there any good resources? Maybe they're looking at this financial independence, retire early. Anything you recommend?
I mean, honestly, the two ideas of it is basically, if you can get to a point where your money is invested, whether it's dividend stocks, whether it's the S&P 500, and it's making 7% a year or whatever after inflation, that's the idea. You make passive income on that, and then you can also cut down your expenses and increase your income in order to make that happen faster. So there's just a ton of resources on YouTube about that. They're just kind of everywhere. Do your own research, of course.
Get
but
on YouTube.
Yeah.
Agree. I think it's an amazing thing. I love it. I know a lot of people do. Like we talked about off air, like Portugal is a really good place, and they do like rental properties in Portugal to try and build passive income.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely you can use Amazon as a vehicle to create the money and then invest in more passive assets and do it that way. I think it's incredible. So if anyone wants to get in contact with you, what's the best way? How can they do it?
Yeah, so I have a YouTube channel that is called Checkmate Flips as well. If you want to get in contact with me, Instagram is probably the best place. I check my messages every single day. Would love to get in contact with you.
Fantastic. And if anyone's watching, I will drop them all down below so you can see a link to, obviously, Checkmate Flips is all social media profiles. So have a look down below. Obviously, you can grab them as well. So I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day and obviously working towards a FIRE, financial independence, retire early, and obviously sharing about your journey and also around VAs. Like I appreciate, there's a lot of stuff you shared in there about, should we say, positivity, looking about task lists, supporting your VAs and taking it forward, and also about where you're going in your business and that transition from, I think you talked about it, Depop going to eBay and then on to Amazon, and also what you're doing in the future and the pros and cons behind it. So thank you so much for sharing that, and and thank you for taking the time today to have the conversation with me and have this interview. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on. This was fun.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.